They thought it was a joke, but the moment she opened her mouth, the room froze. Laughter died, jaws dropped, and what happened next left everyone terrified they were witnessing something unreal. Who was this waitress, and why had she hidden a voice like that? Hello, my beautiful story family. I'm excited to have you here with me today because what you're about to hear will absolutely blow your mind. But first, I need one little favor from you. Please hit that subscribe button if you're ready for a story that'll give you goosebumps, and also drop a comment telling me your city because I love knowing where my story family is tuning in from around the world. And if you've already subscribed and joined this story family, you are welcome back. Tomorrow I'm bringing you another incredible story that you absolutely won't want to miss. Now, let's jump right into today's story and see what unfolds. The restaurant smelled of fried catfish and cornbread, the kind of scent that clung to clothes long after customers had left. Sweet and savory in equal measure. It was Friday evening in Atlanta, and the Magnolia House, a soul food spot tucked between a barber shop and a laundromat, was alive with chatter. Forks clinked against plates, jazz drifted from the corner speakers, and every table seemed to buzz with the kind of easy laughter that only comes after a long week. Behind the counter, Trinika John moved gracefully, balancing 3 plates in her hands as if they were extensions of her body. She wore her black apron tied tight, her hair pulled back in a neat bun, and her eyes sparkled with both fatigue and determination. To most of the customers, she was just the smiling Jamaican waitress who remembered their orders without writing them down. But for those who worked beside her, she was more, a quiet force who held herself with dignity even after 12-hour shifts. Trinika had been in America for 4 years now. She had left her small hometown outside Montego Bay with little more than a suitcase, a passport, and the weight of her family's hopes resting on her shoulders. Her mother was still back home in Jamaica, working odd jobs to support Trinika's younger siblings, 3 bright-eyed children who sent her voice notes every week asking when she'd come home. Music had been the first language of her childhood. In the mornings, her mother would hum gospel hymns while sweeping the yard. At night, neighbors would gather with drums and guitars, filling the air with reggae and folk songs. By the time she was 6, Trinika could mimic any melody she heard. By 10, her voice carried through the hills like honey poured over steel. But when her father passed away unexpectedly, dreams of music took a back seat. Survival came first. Now, in this bustling restaurant in America, her singing lived only in memories. She kept it tucked away like an old diary, something too personal, too fragile to share. That Friday night, a group of college students filled the booth near the stage. They were loud, playful, and already halfway through a pitcher of sweet tea. The restaurant had a small corner where a local band sometimes played, but tonight it sat empty. One of the students, a tall boy with a mischievous grin, caught Trinika as she set down their plates. "Hey, Miss Waitress," he said, chuckling. "Bet you can't sing." His friends laughed, egging him on. "Yeah, grab the mic. Give us a show," another shouted, pointing toward the unused microphone stand near the stage. The joke rolled across the booth, harmless to them, but it landed sharp in Trinika's chest. She forced a polite smile, the way service workers often do, and shook her head. "I'll leave that to the professionals," she replied softly, ready to walk away. But then the restaurant manager, overhearing, chimed in from behind the counter. "You know," he said, smirking, "I've heard her humming back in the kitchen. She's got a little something." The room's attention shifted. Suddenly, eyes turned toward her. The chatter softened. Even the jazz seemed to fade into the background. Trinika's heart thudded. Her secret world, the one she had hidden so carefully, was now dangling in front of strangers as a joke. The students began to chant playfully, "Sing! Sing! Sing!" The manager laughed and gestured toward the mic. "Come on, Trinika. Just one note. One song. For fun." Her throat tightened. Her instincts screamed to refuse, to disappear back into the kitchen and wash dishes until the moment passed. But then she caught the gaze of a little girl at a nearby table, no more than 7, watching her with wide, expectant eyes. Something in that child's face mirrored her younger self, sitting on the porch steps in Jamaica, waiting for her mother to ask her to sing. Before she could think twice, Trinika stepped toward the stage. Each footfall felt like a drumbeat against her nerves. She reached for the microphone, her hands trembling. The crowd chuckled, waiting for entertainment, not art. And then she sang. It wasn't a timid hum or a shaky note. From deep in her chest rose a voice as rich as velvet, soaring through the restaurant like sunlight breaking through clouds. The first note silenced the room. The second stole the breath from every listener. Conversations died mid-sentence. Forks hovered mid-air. By the time she reached the chorus, a soulful gospel refrain she had sung countless times in Jamaica, the entire restaurant was on its feet, clapping, cheering, shouting her name. The climax came not in her voice, but in the realization on her face. She had kept this gift buried, locked away under responsibility and fear, but here it was, undeniable, breathtaking, free. For a moment, she wasn't a waitress working double shifts. She was a singer, an artist, a woman who could command a room with nothing more than her voice. And yet, as the last note faded and the applause shook the walls, Trinika lowered the mic with trembling hands, her face pale. She hadn't expected to feel so exposed. She hadn't expected her secret to ignite like fire. Her life, she realized, had just shifted, and there was no turning back. The applause thundered long after Trinika lowered the microphone. Some customers stood on their chairs, whistling. Others pressed their hands to their hearts as if they had just witnessed something sacred. The manager wiped his eyes discreetly with a napkin, though he'd swear later it was just something in the air. Trinika, however, wanted the floor to swallow her whole. Her hands still trembled, her throat ached, and she felt more exposed than she ever had in her life. She muttered a soft, "Thank you," then darted off the stage, weaving back into the safety of the kitchen. Inside, the clatter of pots and the hiss of frying oil tried to drown out her thoughts, but it was useless. Her mind replayed the moment over and over, the silence before she sang, the gasps after the first note, the tears in the eyes of strangers. She pressed her hands flat against the counter, steadying herself. "What have I done?" she whispered. For years, music had been her private sanctuary, something sacred she only shared with family back home. To sing in front of strangers, and to see their awestruck reactions, felt like stepping into a world she wasn't prepared for. Later that night, after her shift ended, Trinika sat on the worn bus seat heading back to her small apartment. Her phone buzzed nonstop with notifications. Confused, she pulled it from her apron pocket. Her heart nearly stopped. The video. Someone had recorded her performance, shaky, grainy, but unmistakably her voice, and uploaded it online. In just 3 hours, it already had 12,000 views. Comments flooded the screen. "Who is this waitress? She's better than half the artists on the radio." I felt chills. Pure soul. Somebody signed this woman immediately. Her stomach flipped. It wasn't just a moment inside the restaurant anymore. It was out there, alive, unstoppable, reaching thousands of strangers across the country. For Trinika, who had carefully kept her dreams buried. This was terrifying. Music had been her safe secret. Now it was no longer hers alone. When she reached her apartment, she sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the cracked ceiling. Her mother's face flashed in her mind, tired, worn from years of labor in Jamaica. Would her mother scold her for getting distracted, or would she finally understand the music Trinika carried inside her? Her siblings' voices echoed too. They always begged her, "Sing us a song, Trini. Just one before bed." And she always did, because for them, music meant comfort. If they saw this video, would they be proud? Or worried that their sister was losing focus on the reason she came to America, to send money home? She didn't know. All she knew was that the ground beneath her had shifted. The next morning at the Magnolia House, customers crowded the doorway before the restaurant even opened. The manager looked bewildered as people asked, "Is the waitress singing tonight?" Some brought friends, others brought cameras. The restaurant had always been known for good food, but now it had a different kind of buzz. Trinika, tying her apron, felt her pulse race. She hadn't asked for any of this. But the truth was unavoidable. The world had just heard her voice. And it wasn't going to forget. And that was only the beginning. Trinika's secret had slipped into the world, and nothing would ever be the same again. If you were sitting in that restaurant, hearing her voice for the first time, would you have cheered too? Tell us in the comments below. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe, because this story is only just starting to unfold. The morning after her song turned the restaurant upside down, Trinika John walked down Auburn Avenue with her head lowered, clutching her phone in one hand and her apron in the other. Atlanta's streets buzzed with their usual rhythm, honking horns, the chatter of vendors, gospel music spilling from a storefront radio. But inside her chest, her heart was beating faster than the traffic around her. Her phone would not stop buzzing. Every time she glanced at the screen, the view count on that shaky video crept higher. 15,000. 20. By the time she reached the restaurant door, it had crossed 30. 30,000 people. Strangers. All of them had heard the voice she had carefully hidden for years. Inside the Magnolia House, it was chaos in a way she had never seen. Lines stretched out the door. Customers pressed against the windows, craning their necks to peek inside. The manager, a stocky man named Mr. Raymond, stood in the doorway grinning ear to ear. "There she is," he announced as soon as she appeared. "The star of the show." Heads turned. A wave of clapping filled the dining room, people cheering as if she were a celebrity. Trinika froze. Her cheeks burned. She wanted to disappear, but instead, she tied her apron and slipped into her usual routine, balancing plates and dodging questions. But no matter how fast she moved, people stopped her. "When's your next performance? Are you really from Jamaica? Can we hear you sing again tonight?" Every question dug deeper into her nerves. She had come to America for one reason: to send money home. Music wasn't supposed to follow her here. It wasn't supposed to become her second job. By evening, things escalated further. A local radio DJ stopped by, curious to see the waitress with the golden voice. He sat at a booth near the counter, ordering sweet tea and catfish, scribbling notes as he watched the crowd. Trinika noticed, her chest tightening. She knew what was coming. And it did. Just as the dinner rush peaked, the DJ stood, holding his phone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he called out, his voice booming, "I think we should give the people what they came here for. Miss Trinika, would you bless us again?" The restaurant erupted in cheers. Forks clattered onto plates. People pulled out phones, ready to record. Her hands trembled as she wiped them on her apron. Every instinct screamed to say no, to stay in the safety of her role, hidden behind trays of food and polite smiles. But then her eyes landed on the video playing on someone's screen in the front row. It was her, standing on the same stage, pouring out her soul. And something inside her shifted. With shaky steps, she approached the microphone once more. The crowd hushed instantly, like a congregation waiting for the first hymn. She closed her eyes, inhaled deeply, and let her voice spill into the room, not timid this time, but steady, commanding. Her song wrapped itself around the restaurant, weaving through every corner, pressing into every heart. Some customers cried quietly. Others swayed, as if transported to a place they didn't want to leave. And then, something happened. In the middle of her performance, Trinika noticed a man near the bar recording intently. He wasn't like the others. He wasn't smiling, clapping, or moved to tears. He was studying her, almost calculating. And when their eyes met, he gave her the kind of nod that said, "I see more than they do. I see potential." When the final note fell, the applause nearly shook the walls. But Trinika's heart wasn't focused on the clapping or the cameras. It was locked on that stranger at the bar, who had slipped out before the cheers ended, leaving behind only questions and a stirring sense of inevitability. That night, long after the applause had faded and the chairs had been stacked against the walls, Trinika sat alone at the back of the restaurant. A half-empty glass of ginger ale sat before her, the bubbles long gone flat. Her co-workers had left hours ago, but she couldn't bring herself to move. The words of the customers still echoed in her ears. "You were born for this. Girl, that voice could change the world. When's the album dropping?" Each compliment felt like a blessing wrapped in chains. She knew what they didn't, that every dollar she earned here wasn't hers. It was for her siblings' school fees, her mother's medicine, the groceries that kept their household in Jamaica alive. Music couldn't pay bills. Not yet, anyway. She rubbed her temples and whispered, "Lord, what am I supposed to do?" When she finally rose to leave, she noticed something tucked under the microphone stand. A cream-colored business card, crisp and clean, as if it had been placed there deliberately. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. David Calloway, Talent Management and Artist Development. Beneath the name, a simple phone number. Her chest tightened. It had to be from the man at the bar. He hadn't spoken to her, hadn't clapped, hadn't cheered. But he'd left his mark. For a moment, she felt the restaurant spinning around her. This wasn't just applause anymore. It wasn't just a viral video. It was an invitation, a door cracked open, tempting her to step through. That night, in her one-bedroom apartment, Trinika tried to push it aside. She fried plantains, laid her work uniform neatly for the next day, and called her mother back home. "Trini, how are you holding up?" her mother asked, her voice heavy with fatigue. "I'm good, Mama," Trinika replied softly. "Work is busy. Busy is good. It means steady money. Your brother's school fees are due next week. Can you send extra?" Trinika's throat tightened. She glanced at the business card lying face up on the table. "Yes, Mama," she whispered. "I'll send it." She didn't mention the singing. She didn't mention the video, the applause, or the stranger who might hold her future in his hands. She carried it all like a secret weight, unsure if it was a blessing or a curse. By Sunday morning, things had escalated again. The video had reached 80,000 views. Comments came in from strangers across the country. A church choir director in Chicago begged her to come sing with them. A local radio station in Atlanta tagged her, calling her the city's hidden gem. And then the message appeared. On her phone screen, a text from an unknown number. This is David Calloway. I was at the restaurant. Let's talk. You have something rare. Don't waste it. Her hands shook as she read it. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the wall. Her pulse thundered in her ears. This wasn't just a compliment. This was an offer. A path. But every choice came with risk. If she pursued this, she might disappoint her family. She might fall flat and lose the stability she had worked so hard to build. Still, something in her heart whispered louder than her fear. Trinika stood before the mirror, holding the business card between her fingers. For the first time since arriving in America, she let herself imagine more than survival. She let herself picture stages, lights, audiences chanting her name. And as she looked at her own reflection, a thought crystallized in her mind. Maybe my voice isn't just a gift. Maybe it's the way out. She set the card down on the dresser. The decision wasn't made yet, but the seed was planted. And seeds, once planted, have a way of growing, even through concrete. Trinika now stood at the edge of two worlds, the life she had built out of duty, and the future she secretly dreamed of. The choice would not be easy, but one thing was certain: the world was already watching. If you were in her place, would you call the number on that card? Let us know in the comments below. Sunday afternoons at the Magnolia House were usually calm. Families filed in after church, children tugging at their parents' sleeves, the smell of fried chicken and collard greens heavy in the air. But for Trinika, that Sunday felt different. The walls of the restaurant seemed to hum with energy she couldn't escape. Everywhere she went, people whispered. Some called her name as if they'd known her forever. Others slipped folded napkins onto her tray with scribbled compliments. Don't stop singing. You're destined for greatness. It should have been flattering. Instead, it weighed on her like a stone. When she returned to the kitchen, her coworker, Marlene, a sharp-tongued woman with a soft heart, cornered her near the sink. "Girl, you realize what's happening, right?" Marlene said, crossing her arms. Trinika blinked. "What do you mean?" "That voice. You're not just a waitress anymore. You're on people's phones, their radios, probably their TVs by tomorrow." Trinika shook her head quickly, almost too quickly. "I didn't ask for that. I came here to work, to send money home. That's all." Marlene tilted her head, studying her. "And what if the good Lord is telling you this is bigger than that?" The words stuck like honey on Trinika's heart, sweet, heavy, impossible to ignore. That evening, back in her small apartment, the weight of responsibility returned with a vengeance. She sat at the table, a pile of bills spread before her, her laptop open to her bank account. Every line item reminded her of the reason she had left Jamaica. Electric bill, rent due, money transfer receipt for her family. The business card from David Calloway lay beside the pile, its neat black lettering almost glowing against the wood. She picked it up, turned it over in her hands, then set it down again. Over and over. It felt like holding the key to a door she wasn't sure she was allowed to open. She whispered to herself, "Mama would say stay focused. Don't let distractions pull you away." But what if this isn't a distraction? What if this is the path? Her phone buzzed with another text from her younger sister back home. "Trini, can you sing us a song before bed?" Her throat tightened. She sent back a quick voice note, humming the lullaby her mother used to sing. The kind of lullaby that carried hope even in the hardest nights. But after pressing send, her eyes drifted back to the business card. And her heart whispered again. This gift was never meant to stay hidden. The following week only amplified the tension. The video of her singing crossed 150,000 views, picked up by news blogs and shared by strangers across states she had never even visited. A morning show anchor in Atlanta replayed the clip live, saying, "If this young woman doesn't have a record deal by next week, somebody's asleep at the wheel." Trinika watched the segment from the restaurant kitchen, her hands wrapped tight around a mug of coffee. She felt dizzy. Marlene leaned against the counter beside her. "See? The whole world's talking about you. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" Trinika didn't answer. She couldn't, because she didn't know. That night, she finally gave in and dialed the number on the business card. Her finger hovered over the call button for what felt like an eternity. 1 ring, 2 rings. A voice answered, smooth and confident. "This is David Calloway." Trinika froze, words trapped in her throat. For a moment, all she heard was the sound of her own heartbeat pounding like a drum. She almost hung up. But then she swallowed hard and whispered, "This is Trinika. You left your card for me." There was a pause. Then the voice brightened. The waitress with the golden voice. "I was hoping you'd call." Her world tilted again. The choice she had been trying so hard to ignore was no longer in the distance. It was right here, on the other end of the line. "Miss John," David Calloway's voice carried a steady rhythm, confident yet calm, the kind of tone that felt rehearsed but not insincere. "I've been in this business a long time. Voices like yours? They don't come around often. When I heard you sing, I didn't just hear talent, I heard legacy." Trinika clutched the phone tighter, pacing the length of her small apartment. Her bare feet padded softly against the linoleum floor, the business card lying abandoned on the table now replaced by his living, breathing voice in her ear. She whispered, almost defensive, "I'm not a singer. I'm just a waitress. I work to send money back home." David chuckled softly. "A waitress? Sure, that's your job. But your calling is much bigger. Tell me, do you really think God gave you that voice just to call table numbers?" The words hit her squarely in the chest. She sat down, staring at the peeling paint on her wall, feeling as if he'd pulled a secret from her soul. David pressed on. "Here's what I'm offering. I can get you in front of people who matter. Record labels, producers, stages that'll put you in front of millions, not just the 50 folks in that restaurant. But I need to know if you're serious. This isn't a hobby, Trinika. This is a commitment. And commitment means sacrifice." Sacrifice. The word echoed through her mind like a church bell. What would her mother say? Probably that she was being reckless. What about her siblings? They depended on the money she sent every 2 weeks. Would they understand if she earned less now, chasing a dream that might never pay off? And yet, she remembered the way the restaurant had fallen silent when she sang. The way the little girl in the front row looked at her as if she were magic. The way strangers online said her voice gave them hope. Could that really be meaningless? "Mr. Calloway," she said quietly, "I don't even know where to start. I have no training, no money for lessons. I've never been on a real stage. I've never even tried." "That's the beauty of it," David replied, his voice low but charged with energy. "You're raw, authentic. People connect to you because you're real. And in this business, real is priceless." Silence stretched between them. Trinika's breathing grew shallow, her chest tight. "Sleep on it," David said finally. "But don't wait too long. The world is watching now. And in this business, attention is a window. If you don't climb through it, it closes." He ended the call. Trinika lowered the phone slowly, her hands shaking. She looked around her small apartment, the stack of bills on the table, the chipped mug on the counter, the worn shoes by the door. All the signs of a life built on sacrifice. Then her gaze fell back on the phone screen, where the viral video played again in her notifications. Her own voice filled the air, soaring, unstoppable, undeniable. She pressed her palms against her face, whispering, "What if this is the chance? What if this is the moment that changes everything?" For the first time, the idea didn't terrify her as much as it thrilled her. The week after her call with David Calloway felt like a storm hovering over Trinika's life, not yet breaking, but heavy in the air, impossible to ignore. At the Magnolia House, the once ordinary restaurant now pulsed with anticipation every time she walked in. Customers no longer whispered her name, they spoke it out loud as if it belonged to them. "Is Trinika singing tonight? When's she performing again?" The manager, Mr. Raymond, pulled her aside one evening. "You realize you're bringing in half this business now, don't you? Folks aren't here for the catfish anymore. They're here for you." His smile was proud, but to Trinika it felt like a weight. She hadn't asked for this spotlight, yet it kept finding her. On Thursday evening, as she was cleaning tables, a man in a sharp navy suit stepped through the restaurant doors. His presence was commanding, broad shoulders, polished shoes, eyes that seemed to scan the room and find exactly what he wanted. He walked straight to her. "Miss John." Trinika froze, her cloth mid-wipe on the table. "Yes." He extended a hand. "David Calloway. We spoke on the phone." Her heart skipped. Seeing him in person made everything real in a way the phone call hadn't. He looked like he belonged to a different world, a world of bright lights and endless stages. "I thought we could talk face to face," he said smoothly. "Do you have a few minutes?" She nodded, leading him to a booth at the back of the restaurant. The scent of fried okra and sweet tea lingered in the air as she slid nervously into the seat across from him. David leaned forward, his voice low but steady. "Here's the truth, Trinika. You've already captured attention. That video of you? It's closing in on 500,000 views. That's no accident. That's momentum. And momentum, in this business, is gold. But momentum fades. If you don't act now, people will move on." She swallowed hard, twisting the edge of her apron in her lap. "I can't just walk away from my job. My family depends on me. They need the money." David's expression softened, but his eyes remained sharp. "I'm not asking you to abandon them. I'm asking you to believe that your voice could give them more than tips from serving tables ever will. Imagine being able to send more than just enough. Imagine giving them a new life entirely." The words pierced her, both thrilling and terrifying. Could singing really do that? Could it lift her family from struggle into stability? Before she could respond, Marlene appeared, holding a tray of drinks. She gave David a once-over, then glanced at Trinika. "You gonna sit here and play small, or you gonna listen to what this man's saying?" Trinika blinked, stunned by her friend's bluntness. "Don't give me that look," Marlene continued. "I've been watching you hide behind those plates and trays for years. You've got something special, girl. And if you let fear stop you, you'll regret it for the rest of your life." Her words cut deeper than David's polished pitch ever could, because they came from someone who had scrubbed the same floors, counted the same tips, carried the same exhaustion. David slid a sleek envelope across the table. "There's a showcase downtown this Saturday night. Small crowd, but the right kind of crowd. Producers, local radio, a few label scouts. I can get you on the stage. 10 minutes. That's all I'm asking." Trinika stared at the envelope as if it were glowing. Inside was a chance, fragile but real. Her pulse quickened. Her breath caught. She thought of her mother's tired voice asking for money, her siblings' laughter through phone calls, the way the crowd in the restaurant had erupted when she sang. For years, she had buried her gift in the soil of responsibility. And now, here it was, pushing to bloom. With trembling hands, she reached out and touched the envelope. She didn't open it yet, but even that simple motion felt like crossing a line she could never uncross. That night, the envelope sat on the small wooden table in Trinika's apartment like it was alive. The creamy paper caught the light from the single lamp, glowing faintly as though it carried both promise and warning. She had placed it there carefully, but she couldn't stop staring at it. Every few minutes she reached for it, sliding her fingers along the edge as if she might open it, only to pull her hand back again. She was exhausted from her shift, but sleep refused to come. Finally, she whispered aloud, as if the walls could answer her, "What if this is the chance? What if I fail? What if Mama's right, and I should just focus on work?" The silence swallowed her questions. Her phone buzzed. A video call. It was her younger brother, Malik. His big brown eyes and gap-toothed smile filled the screen. "Trini," he shouted. "We saw the video. Everybody in church is talking about you." Her heart skipped. "You saw it?" "Of course. You sounded like an angel." Mama pretended she wasn't impressed, but I saw her wiping her eyes. She was proud, Trini. Don't let her pretend otherwise. The camera jostled as her little sister squeezed into view, waving. "Sing for us again." Tears welled in Trinika's eyes. She hummed a soft melody, the same lullaby she used to sing them to sleep with. Their giggles filled her apartment, a sound more precious than any applause. When the call ended, she sat for a long time, clutching the phone to her chest. Her siblings had already seen her differently. They didn't see a waitress, they saw a star. She rose and paced the room, the envelope still waiting like a test she couldn't avoid. "What if I mess this up?" she whispered to herself. "What if I lose everything trying?" But another voice, quieter but stronger, echoed in her mind, Marlene's words at the restaurant. "If you let fear stop you, you'll regret it for the rest of your life." She froze, gripping the edge of the counter. The truth was painful but clear. She had already sacrificed so much for her family. But maybe chasing this dream wasn't selfish. Maybe it was the boldest way to honor them. At last, she sat at the table and tore open the envelope. Inside was a single sheet with details. Saturday, 7 p.m. Atlanta Showcase Theater. 10 minutes. Bring nothing but your voice. Her hands shook as she read it. 10 minutes. Just 10 minutes that could decide everything. She folded the paper back neatly, her chest pounding. The choice was no longer hypothetical. She had agreed, if only to herself, to step onto that stage. And in that moment, Trinika John, the waitress who had spent years hiding her voice, felt the stirrings of transformation. She was no longer just working to survive. She was preparing to be heard. Saturday crept closer like a shadow that refused to be ignored. Each day at the Magnolia House felt heavier, not because of the weight of trays or the endless orders, but because of the invisible burden in Trinika's chest. The showcase loomed in her mind from sunrise to midnight, wrapping her in equal parts excitement and dread. Every free moment she sang. She practiced in the quiet storage room during her breaks, in the echo of the empty restaurant after closing, in her tiny apartment where the neighbors sometimes knocked on the wall, not to complain, but to say, "Sing louder." But no matter how much she rehearsed, doubt crept in like an unwelcome guest. What if her nerves failed her? What if the showcase crowd wasn't like the restaurant audience? There, she had been a surprise, a waitress turned singer. At the showcase, she'd be expected to deliver. Expectations, she realized, were much heavier than applause. On Wednesday, the restaurant was busier than ever. Customers lined up outside, waiting not just for food but for a glimpse of her. Some begged for another song. Others shoved phones in her face for selfies. Mr. Raymond beamed at the attention, patting her shoulder proudly. "You're the best thing that ever happened to this place, Trini. Don't you forget it." But Trinika felt torn. Every cheer, every request, every compliment reminded her that her voice was no longer her own. It belonged to strangers now, to the internet, to a world that expected more every single day. By the time she left work that night, her feet ached, her throat was raw, and her spirit felt pulled thin. She collapsed onto her bed, staring at the ceiling, the envelope from David Calloway resting on her nightstand like a reminder she couldn't escape. The phone buzzed. It was her mother. "Trini," her mother said, her voice tired but firm. "I heard you've been singing again. Malik showed me the video." Trinika's breath caught. "Mama, Her mother cut her off. "You went to America to work. To send money. Not to chase dreams. Dreams don't pay bills." Tears burned at the back of her eyes. "Mama, it's not just a dream. People believe in me. There's an opportunity." "Opportunity?" Her mother's tone sharpened. "What about responsibility? Your little sister needs new shoes. The rent here is late. Don't you dare get distracted, Trini. We cannot afford it." The line went quiet. Trinika sat frozen, her heart pounding, guilt crashing over her like a wave. She wanted to argue, to explain how this chance might be bigger than anything she'd ever imagined. But her mother's words struck deep, and silence was all she could manage. When the call ended, she buried her face in her hands and sobbed quietly. For the first time since arriving in America, she wished she could be two people at once, one who carried her family's burdens, and another who chased the fire inside her chest. The next morning, she dragged herself through her shift, her eyes hollow from lack of sleep. Marlene noticed instantly. "Girl, what's eating you alive?" she asked, sliding a plate of biscuits onto a table. Trinika shook her head. "Mama thinks I'm wasting time. She wants me to forget all this and just work." Marlene sighed, wiping her hands on her apron. "Of course she's scared. She's worried about the bills, the kids, the food. But you can't live scared, Trini. If you let fear make your choices, you'll stay stuck forever. And you're not meant to be stuck." Her words lit a small flame inside Trinika, but the fire battled fiercely with the storm of doubt in her chest. That night, she stood in front of her mirror again, practicing the song she planned to sing at the showcase. Her voice cracked mid-verse, her nerves spilling into the melody. She stopped abruptly, staring at her reflection. Her eyes looked tired. Her shoulders slumped. For a terrifying moment, she wondered if her mother was right. If all of this was just foolishness, a distraction from what really mattered. But as silence filled the room, she caught a glimpse of something else in her reflection, determination, fragile but present. She straightened her shoulders, wiped her tears, and whispered to herself, "I can't let fear win." Thursday evening, 2 nights before the showcase, the pressure finally broke through. Trinika had stayed late at the Magnolia House, rehearsing in the back room while wiping down counters. She thought she was alone, her voice filling the quiet kitchen. But when she finished, the sound of clapping startled her. It was a group of customers peeking in from the hallway, their phones already raised, recording. "Sing that one again," one of them shouted. "You sound better than Beyoncé," another laughed. Her cheeks burned. She quickly set down the rag and waved them off, But she knew it was too late. More videos would spread, more expectations would rise. And suddenly, what had once been joy felt like a cage closing in. The next day, David Calloway called to check in. His tone was calm but direct. "Are you ready, Trinika? Saturday night is everything. This is your chance to prove yourself." Her throat went dry. She wanted to say yes, but the truth spilled out instead. "I don't know if I can do this. My mama's depending on me. What if I fail? What if all these people are wrong about me?" David's voice dropped low, serious. "Listen to me. Everyone's afraid before their first real stage. But the ones who make it? They step into the fear anyway. You don't need to be perfect, Trinika. You just need to be you. That's what they love. Don't you dare rob the world of that." The call ended, but his words echoed in her mind like a drumbeat. That night she called her mother again, hoping for reassurance. "Mama, I've been offered to sing at a showcase downtown. People will be there, people who could change everything." There was a long pause on the other end. Then her mother sighed heavily. "Trini, I raised you to be steady, not reckless. Don't gamble with what you can't afford to lose. Please just focus on work." The words sliced through her. She hung up quickly, not trusting her voice to hold steady. Tears blurred her vision as she sat alone in the dark apartment, hugging her knees to her chest. The silence of her mother's disappointment cut deeper than any crowd's rejection ever could. On Friday evening, the night before the showcase, Trinika tried one last time to rehearse. She stood in front of her mirror, clutching her makeshift microphone, and began to sing. But her voice cracked. Her throat tightened with panic. Her palms grew clammy. The song that usually flowed like a river stumbled into broken notes. She stopped, gasping. Her reflection stared back at her, not as a singer, not as a star, but as a tired waitress chasing something she didn't deserve. And in that crushing moment, fear whispered its cruelest lie: "You're not enough." Her knees gave out and she sank onto the floor, trembling. Tomorrow she would have to face a real stage. And right now, she didn't know if she had the strength to stand at all. Saturday night arrived draped in nerves. The Atlanta Showcase Theater glowed against the city's skyline, its marquee lights casting golden reflections onto the wet pavement. Cars lined the street, crowds gathered at the entrance, and inside, the air was thick with ambition. Backstage, Trinika sat on a folding chair, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. Her voice felt trapped in her chest, her throat dry. She could hear the muffled buzz of the audience beyond the curtain, voices, laughter, the shuffle of programs. Each sound felt like a wave crashing against her ribs. David Calloway appeared at her side, calm as ever in his tailored suit. "You've got 10 minutes, he said softly. "That's all it takes. 10 minutes to show them you're not just another viral clip. You ready?" Trinika nodded weakly, though inside she felt anything but. Other performers milled about, warming up, laughing confidently, some eyeing her curiously. One young woman, tall and sharp-featured, gave her a mocking smile. "You're the waitress, right?" she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "Cute story. Viral video. But this isn't a restaurant crowd. This is real competition. Don't choke out there." Her friends snickered, and the words hit like daggers. Trinika turned away quickly, but doubt surged again, stronger than before. She thought of her cracked rehearsal the night before, her mother's harsh warnings, her siblings' hopeful eyes. The weight of all of it pressed down until she thought she might suffocate. The MC's voice boomed through the speakers. "Next up we have Trinika John." The applause was polite, curious, but not explosive. She wasn't known here, not like the others. She was an unknown, a waitress with a story, and many were ready to dismiss her as nothing more. Trinika stepped onto the stage, the spotlight searing her vision. The theater seemed impossibly vast, faces blurred in the shadows, only the brightness of the stage lights keeping her company. Her knees trembled. Her hands shook as she gripped the microphone. For a terrifying moment, nothing came out. Silence spread, awkward and heavy. Then, a voice from the crowd shouted, "Sing, waitress!" Laughter rippled through the room. Her chest tightened. She could feel her throat closing, the weight of humiliation crashing in. But then, in that darkness of doubt, something stirred. She remembered Malik's smile on the video call, her little sister's tiny voice begging, "Sing for us again." She remembered Marlene's fierce encouragement, David's steady words, and the strangers online who said her voice gave them hope. She closed her eyes, inhaled deeply, and let the first note escape. It wasn't timid. It wasn't broken. It was fire. Pure, soulful fire. Her voice poured out, trembling at first, then soaring higher and higher until it wrapped the theater in warmth and strength. Every lyric carried her story, the weight of sacrifice, the ache of dreams deferred, the unshakable hope that had carried her across oceans. The laughter died instantly. Faces softened. Jaws dropped. Some audience members leaned forward, as if trying to capture every note in their hands. And then, at the peak of the song, Trinika opened her eyes. She wasn't afraid anymore. The spotlight no longer burned. It bathed her. By the final chorus, the entire theater was on its feet. Applause thundered, echoing against the walls. People whistled, shouted her name, some even wiping tears. Backstage, the sharp-featured woman who had mocked her earlier now stood frozen, disbelief painted across her face. And in the audience, one of the producers leaned toward David Calloway, whispering, "Who is this girl? Where did she come from?" Trinika lowered the microphone slowly, her chest heaving, her eyes shimmering with emotion. She had walked onto that stage as a waitress. She walked off as something else entirely. The sound of the applause followed Trinika off stage like a wave crashing over her. Back in the wings, her chest still heaved from the power of her song, her palms damp from gripping the microphone too tightly. She leaned against the wall for balance, her heart pounding so fast she thought it might burst. David Calloway appeared almost instantly, his sharp suit catching the glow of the stage lights. He didn't smile at first, he just stared at her with narrowed eyes, as though studying something rare, something valuable. Then he nodded slowly. "You did it," he said quietly, his voice carrying more weight than the roar of the crowd. "You didn't just sing. You owned that stage." Her knees nearly gave out, but she steadied herself. The fear that had nearly silenced her minutes earlier was gone, replaced by something entirely new, the realization that she belonged. Back in the audience, whispers spread like wildfire. Producers exchanged cards. A radio host scribbled furiously into his notepad. The people who had laughed at her introduction now leaned forward in their seats, talking excitedly about the waitress with the voice of fire. As Trinika slipped past the curtains, the other performers looked at her differently. Some with admiration, others with envy. The sharp-featured woman who had mocked her earlier stood stiff, arms crossed, her eyes sharp with something that looked a lot like fear. "Beginner's luck," she muttered under her breath, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. Trinika didn't respond. For the first time, she didn't need to. Outside the theater later that night, The cool Atlanta air wrapped around her as she stepped into the street. She was exhausted, her voice raw, but the adrenaline still surged through her veins. That's when she noticed the crowd gathered near the exit. Strangers holding out their phones, begging for pictures. A young girl pressed forward, clutching her mother's hand. "Miss Trinika," the little girl said shyly, "your song, it made me feel like I could do anything." Tears pricked at Trinika's eyes. She bent down, squeezing the girl's hand gently. "Never forget that you can," she whispered. As she straightened, the flash of cameras burst around her. For a moment, the waitress who had once hidden her gift was nowhere to be found. In her place stood a woman stepping into something larger than herself. Later that night, David called her as she sat alone in her apartment, replaying the moment over and over. "Trinika," he said firmly, "your life is about to change. After tonight, there's no hiding. Doors are about to open, but you'll need to decide if you're ready to walk through them. Because this is only the beginning." She looked around her apartment. The chipped mugs, the worn shoes, the stack of bills. Then she looked down at her own hands, still trembling from the song she had delivered. For the first time, the fear didn't outweigh the hope. As she sat in the dim light of her room, her phone buzzed with messages. Producers, radio hosts, even strangers from across the country who had already found clips of her performance online. She pressed the phone to her chest, whispering to herself, "I'm not just a waitress anymore." And deep inside, she knew she had crossed a line that could never be undone. Trinika's voice had turned a room full of skeptics into believers, and the world was now demanding more. But with every door opening, new obstacles would rise: jealousy, pressure, and sacrifices she never imagined. Do you believe she's ready for what comes next? Share your answer in the comments, and don't forget to like and please subscribe to support this channel. And for Trinika, the battles ahead will test her spirit more than ever before. By Monday morning, the clip of Trinika's performance at the showcase had spread far beyond Atlanta. Bloggers called her the waitress who stunned the city. Radio DJs replayed her voice over and over, dissecting every note with awe. By midweek, television talk shows debated whether she was the next big thing. For Trinika, it was dizzying. She had always been invisible, moving through life with her head down, apron tied, bills tucked into envelopes sent back home. Now, she couldn't walk to the bus stop without someone recognizing her. Some wanted pictures. Others begged her to sing on the spot. The same customers who once ignored her now lined up at the Magnolia House, ordering food just for the chance to hear her hum while working. The restaurant swelled with crowds so thick that Raymond, the manager, had to double the staff. "Business is booming," he told her one night, slapping a receipt book proudly. "And it's all because of you. You better not quit on me now, Trini." She smiled politely, but inside his words twisted. Because the truth was, she was thinking about leaving. Not because she wanted to abandon him or her coworkers, but because the world beyond the restaurant was pulling at her harder each day. David Calloway wasted no time. He arranged meetings with producers, small studio sessions, and interviews with local journalists. Trinika found herself sitting in glossy offices, sipping bottled water while executives with polished smiles said words like potential, branding, and record deal. It all felt unreal. She was still sending money to her family each week, still riding the bus in her faded work shoes, and yet here she was, listening to strangers discuss her as if she were a product to be packaged and sold. One evening after a meeting, she confessed her fears to David. "They make it sound so easy, but I don't know if I can handle all of this. It's too much." David studied her carefully. Talent opens the door, Trinika. But character keeps you in the room. If you're serious, you'll need to decide if you're ready to fight for this. Because nothing about this business is easy. His words sank into her chest like stones. Not everyone was celebrating her rise. The sharp-featured singer from the showcase, Vanessa, began spreading whispers online. On social media, she posted clips of Trinika's restaurant performance with snide captions, "Cute voice, but let's see if the waitress can keep up with real artists." Some followers chimed in with support for Trinika, but others echoed Vanessa's cruelty. She's just a fluke. One-hit wonder. Viral gimmick. When Trinika stumbled upon the posts late one night, her stomach dropped. She had known envy would come, but the sting of it still cut deep. She turned off her phone, but the words burned into her memory. The biggest blow came when she called her mother again. "Mama, I think things are changing," she said carefully. "People want me to record. Maybe even sign a contract." Her mother's response was heavy with doubt. "Contracts don't put food on the table today, Trini. You're chasing clouds. Don't forget why you left Jamaica. We need your help, not your dreams." The silence that followed felt heavier than any applause she had ever received. For the first time, Trinika realized her journey might take her farther from her family before it ever brought her closer. That weekend, David arranged another live performance at a small downtown lounge. It was supposed to be simple, just a room of 50, a microphone, and her voice. But as she stepped onto the stage, the room didn't feel welcoming. Half the crowd was buzzing with excitement. The other half, likely fueled by Vanessa's online comments, crossed their arms, skeptical. She could feel their judgment like ice across her skin. Her palms grew sweaty, her throat tight. The cheers from her supporters clashed against the quiet murmurs of her doubters. And standing in the middle of that tension, she realized something chilling. This wasn't just about singing anymore. It was about survival. If she faltered now, they'd confirm every cruel word Vanessa had planted. If she soared, she'd prove she was more than a waitress, more than a viral moment. Her heart pounded as she raised the microphone. The battle wasn't just outside anymore. It was inside her, clawing to be won. The microphone felt heavier than usual in Trinika's hands. The lounge was small, no more than 50 people, but the energy inside was sharp, divided. One half of the room leaned forward eagerly, phones in hand, ready to capture her magic. The other half lounged back in their seats, arms crossed, eyes skeptical, smirks daring her to prove she was more than a waitress who got lucky. For a moment, the noise in her head drowned out everything. "They don't believe in you. Vanessa was right. You're nothing but a viral gimmick." She closed her eyes and inhaled deeply, summoning the memory of her siblings' laughter, of Malik telling her she sounded like an angel, of her little sister begging her to sing again. She thought of Marlene's fierce words, "If you let fear stop you, you'll regret it for the rest of your life." And then she sang. The first note was shaky, trembling under the weight of expectation. A ripple of murmurs swept through the doubter's side of the room. But she steadied herself, tightened her grip on the microphone, and let her voice rise. With each verse, her tone grew stronger, deeper, fuller. The song wasn't just a melody, it was her story. The years of sacrifice, the aching distance from her family, the long nights scrubbing tables, the fear that had followed her every step. She poured it all into the performance until her voice was no longer just sound. It was survival. The skeptics shifted in their seats. One by one, their crossed arms loosened. Faces that had been carved with doubt softened, eyes widening as the force of her voice broke through their resistance. By the final chorus, Even the coldest expressions melted. The applause erupted before the last note had even faded, thunderous in the small lounge, bouncing off the walls until it felt larger than life. But not everyone cheered. From the corner of the room, Vanessa herself sat with her arms folded, her eyes sharp with envy. She didn't clap. She didn't move. She just smirked, her phone already in her hand, typing furiously. Later that night, Trinika's social media exploded again, clips from her performance spreading quickly. Supporters hailed her as the real deal. But buried among the praise were venomous posts seeded by Vanessa's followers. Overhyped. Anyone can sing one good song. She's being pushed too fast. She's fake. Don't buy into the sob story. The praise fueled her courage. The hate fueled her fear. And caught between the two, Trinika realized that every step forward meant more eyes, and not all of them wished her well. Alone in her apartment that night, she scrolled through the comments with shaking hands. The screen flickered between love and hate, encouragement and cruelty. Her chest tightened until tears spilled down her cheeks. She whispered to herself, "I wanted to be heard. I didn't know it would feel like this." And yet, even through the tears, she couldn't ignore the truth. The world had heard her now. And the louder she sang, the more they would listen, whether they loved her or tried to tear her down. Atlanta's skyline glittered against the night, but Trinika barely noticed as she walked home from the lounge. The applause from earlier still echoed faintly in her ears, yet it was drowned out by the cruel words she had read online. Words meant to tear her down, words that clung to her like shadows she couldn't shake. By the time she reached her apartment, her body was heavy with exhaustion. She dropped her bag by the door, collapsed onto the couch, and stared blankly at the ceiling. Her phone buzzed nonstop beside her, but she didn't reach for it. She couldn't. When she finally gathered the strength to look, the notifications flooded her screen, hundreds of comments, both praise and poison. And in the middle of it all, a new post from Vanessa. A video. Spliced clips of Trinika singing, edited to highlight shaky moments, with a caption that read, "She fooled a few people tonight. But real artists don't crack under pressure." The comments beneath it were brutal. Laughter. Mockery. Trinika's throat tightened. Her fingers hovered over the screen, wanting to defend herself, to shout the truth, but instead she turned the phone off and buried it under a pillow. She called her mother again, desperate for comfort. The line crackled before her mother's tired voice came through. "Mama," she whispered, "things are getting hard. People are saying terrible things. I don't know if I can handle it." Her mother sighed, long and weary. "Trini, I warned you. Fame is a fickle thing. One minute they love you, the next they tear you apart. You should have stayed focused on work. At least then we could count on you." The words stung worse than Vanessa's post. Her own mother, the woman she was working so hard to support, couldn't see her struggle as anything but a distraction. Tears blurred her vision. "Mama, I thought, maybe this could change everything for us." "Dreams don't pay bills, child," her mother said softly, before ending the call. The line went dead. The silence that followed was unbearable. Trinika curled on the couch, her body trembling as sobs shook her. She had never felt so small, so defeated. For years she had told herself that sacrifice was worth it, every long shift, every aching foot, every dollar sent home. She believed her voice was the one thing that could give her family a better future. But now, sitting alone in the dark, she wondered if she had been wrong all along. The world wanted more than just her voice. It wanted her heart, her strength, her soul, and right now, she had nothing left to give. That night, she stood in front of her mirror, microphone in hand, ready to rehearse. She wanted to remind herself she could still sing, that she wasn't broken. But when she opened her mouth, no sound came. Her throat locked tight, her voice caught in her chest. She tried again, forcing the notes out, but they cracked, jagged and unrecognizable. She dropped the microphone, her reflection blurring through tears. For the first time in her life, Trinika John, the girl who had been singing since she was 6, the girl who had stunned a restaurant, silenced a theater, and lit up a city, felt like her voice had left her. And without it, she wasn't just powerless. She was nothing. The following morning, the sun filtered weakly through the blinds of Trinika's apartment. She hadn't slept. Her eyes were swollen, her body drained, and her spirit felt hollow. She sat in silence, staring at the microphone lying on the floor where she had dropped it the night before. It looked like a fallen crown, mocking her with its stillness. Her phone buzzed again and again. At first, she ignored it. But when the vibration wouldn't stop, she finally picked it up. This time, it wasn't cruel comments or cutting headlines. It was Marlene. "Girl, open your door," the message read. Confused, Trinika shuffled to the door and pulled it open. There stood Marlene, holding 2 paper bags of takeout and wearing her usual no-nonsense expression. "You look like death warmed over," Marlene said bluntly, brushing past her into the apartment. "Eat something before you collapse." As they sat at the table, Marlene fixed her with a sharp stare. "I don't care what those haters are saying. I don't care what your mama said. I was there, Trina. I saw the way you own that stage. You've got something people can't buy, can't fake, can't tear down. Don't you dare let some jealous wannabe steal that from you." Trinika's throat tightened. "But what if they're right, Marlene? What if I'm just a fluke? What if—" Marlene slammed her hand against the table. "Stop. Don't you dare talk like that. You've been singing since before you could spell your name. This is who you are. You don't get to quit just because it got hard." The words hit her like thunder, breaking through the storm inside. Later that day, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a voice note from Malik. "Trini," his young voice chirped, "I don't care what people are saying. You're my sister, and you're the best singer in the world. Don't forget why you started. You always told us your voice was a gift. Don't stop sharing it now." Tears spilled freely down her cheeks. She played the message again and again, clutching the phone to her chest as if holding her brother's words close could stitch her back together. That night, she stood in front of the mirror once more. Her hands still shook as she picked up the microphone. Fear whispered in her ear, but this time she remembered Marlene's fire, Malik's encouragement, the little girl at the theater who had said her song made her believe she could do anything. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and sang. The first note wavered, fragile, uncertain, but it came. The second grew steadier. The third carried the strength of everything she had endured. By the time she reached the chorus, her voice was whole again, rising and filling the room like it had never been lost. She fell to her knees, not in despair but in gratitude. She wasn't broken. She was bruised, yes, but her voice, her gift, was still alive. In that moment, she made a quiet vow. She wouldn't let doubt or jealousy define her. If the world wanted to test her, she would answer with her voice. If they tried to bury her, she would rise louder. Her crisis hadn't destroyed her. It had lit a fire she hadn't known she carried. Even in her darkest hour, Trinika found the strength to rise again. With her family's love and her community's support, her voice returned stronger than before. But the battles ahead will be fiercer than anything she's faced yet. Do you believe she can keep rising above the storm? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe, because the fight for her dream is far from over. The auditorium was larger than anything Trinika had ever seen. Thousands of seats stretched upward in a sea of faces, the glow of stage lights flooding the vast space with heat. This wasn't the Magnolia House or a cozy lounge downtown. This was the finals of the national competition, the kind of stage that could launch a career or crush a dream in a single song. Backstage, performers whispered prayers, paced in circles, or rehearsed their notes under their breath. Trinika sat in the corner, microphone in hand, her palms slick with sweat. Her heart thundered so loudly she could barely hear the announcer calling names. She remembered her mother's warnings, Vanessa's cruel words, the online hate that had clawed at her confidence. But then she thought of Malik's voice note, Marlene's fierce encouragement, and the little girl at the theater who said she made her feel like she could do anything. All of it, the pain, the doubt, the love, the hope, swirled inside her chest. Tonight wasn't just about winning. It was about reclaiming her voice, her identity, her worth. The MC's voice boomed through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage, Trinika John." Applause burst through the auditorium. Some cheered wildly. Others clapped politely, curious. But Trinika barely heard them. She stepped into the light, the stage stretching before her like a battlefield. Her hands shook as she gripped the microphone, the weight of thousands of eyes pressing against her. For a moment, fear threatened to choke her. Her throat tightened, the same way it had during the crisis. The memory of silence, of failure, hovered close. Then it happened. A voice from the crowd, sharp, mocking, cut through the air. "Sing, waitress." Laughter rippled through a section of the audience, echoing her earliest humiliation. Her knees buckled slightly, her vision blurring. She could have crumbled right there. But then she heard another voice, faint but steady, Malik's words replaying in her mind, "You're the best singer in the world." Her spine straightened. She closed her eyes, blocking out the laughter, the lights, the fear. And she sang. It wasn't just a note. It was a declaration. A sound so raw, so charged with emotion, that it cut straight through the auditorium. The laughter died instantly. The air shifted. Every ear bent toward her, every heart stilled. Her voice rose higher, carrying with it the ache of sacrifice, the sting of doubt, the fire of resilience. Each verse was a confession, each chorus a cry of freedom. She wasn't just singing words, she was telling her story. The story of a Jamaican girl who carried her family's burdens, who hid her gift for years, who nearly let fear silence her, but who now refused to be anything less than seen. The crowd leaned forward, caught in the grip of her voice. Some wiped tears. Others clutched their chests. Even the judges, so often stoic, were moved to stand. As the song built to its final crescendo, Trinika opened her eyes. She didn't look at the audience or the judges. She looked upward, toward the heavens, as if giving thanks to something greater than herself. Her final note soared, filling every corner of the auditorium, reverberating in the hearts of everyone present. And when the sound finally faded, silence hung for a heartbeat, heavy, breathless. Then the auditorium erupted. Applause thundered like a storm, rising to a deafening roar. People stood, clapping, shouting her name, some even crying openly. Trinika lowered the microphone, her body trembling, her chest heaving. She had faced the fire, and she had not only survived it, she had turned it into light. The roar of the crowd rattled the rafters of the auditorium. People rose to their feet, clapping, cheering, chanting her name in unison. Trinika, Trinika, Trinika. For a moment, she stood frozen in the spotlight, blinking back tears. The sound washed over her like an ocean wave, almost too much to bear. Her throat tightened, but this time it wasn't fear. It was release. It was joy. Backstage, David Calloway pressed a hand against his chest, shaking his head in disbelief. That wasn't just a performance, he whispered to another manager. That was history. One by one, the judges rose from their seats. I don't say this often, one began, his voice booming through the microphone. But what we witnessed tonight was not just talent, it was truth. You gave us more than a song, Miss John. You gave us yourself. Another judge leaned forward, visibly moved. When you stepped on this stage, you carried every burden, every sacrifice, every hope with you. And you transformed it into something unforgettable. You are not just a waitress. You are an artist. And tonight, you proved that to the world. The crowd erupted again, stomping, clapping, shouting. In the front row, Vanessa sat stiffly, her arms crossed. She had mocked Trinika, tried to belittle her, tried to sow doubt in her path. But now, even she couldn't mask the truth. Their eyes met across the crowd. For a heartbeat, Vanessa's face softened, not with kindness, but with reluctant acknowledgement. She looked away first, and in that moment, Trinika understood something vital. She no longer needed to defend herself against envy or hate. Her voice had done it for her. As the MC announced the end of the night, the energy in the auditorium refused to die down. The audience chanted her name again, louder, as if demanding the world remember it. Trinika lowered the microphone, her hands still trembling, and whispered to herself, "This is who I am. This is who I was always meant to be." The lights dimmed, the curtains began to close, but the fire inside her blazed brighter than ever before. The auditorium was still humming when the final results were announced. The air felt electric, as if every person in the building was holding their breath. And the winner of this year's National Music Showcase is... The MC's voice stretched the pause until it was unbearable. Trinika John. The room erupted. Cheers thundered, confetti burst from the rafters, and her name filled the space like a chant of victory. She stood center stage, stunned, her hands clasped over her mouth. For a moment, time slowed. She saw flashes of her journey in her mind, the restaurant where it all began, the customers chanting for her to sing, the business card left under the microphone, her mother's stern voice on the phone, Malik's laughter, Marlene's encouragement. Every step, every tear, every sacrifice had led here. David Calloway rushed on stage, pulling her into a proud embrace. "I told you," he whispered in her ear. "The world needed to hear you." The following week was a blur. Interviews, headlines, invitations to perform. People stopped her on the street not just to say hello, but to thank her. They told her her story gave them hope, her voice gave them courage. But what mattered most was the moment she called home. Her mother answered, her tone hesitant at first. "Trini." "Yes, Mama." Her voice trembled. "I won." There was silence, then the faint sound of weeping. Her mother's voice cracked through the line. "I was wrong. Forgive me. I thought dreams were a luxury we couldn't afford. But you turned them into something real. I am so proud of you." Tears streamed down Trinika's face as Malik and her little sister shouted in the background, their voices bursting with joy. "We knew you could do it, Trini. We knew it." For the first time in years, she didn't feel the crushing distance between her and her family. Their pride had bridged the ocean. Despite the whirlwind of success, Trinika insisted on returning to the Magnolia House. She walked through the doors in her same worn shoes, though now the restaurant buzzed differently. Customers stood to applaud, staff rushed to hug her, and Raymond wiped his eyes proudly. "You'll always have a place here," he said, his voice thick with emotion. She smiled warmly. "And you'll always be the place where it began." That night, without cameras, without producers, without the pressure of competition, she picked up the microphone once more and sang for her coworkers, her community, her family watching on a shaky video call from Jamaica. And in that intimate space, her voice was just as powerful as it had been on the grand stage. Because it wasn't about proving herself anymore. It was about giving thanks. Weeks after the competition, Trinika's life had transformed in ways she never imagined. She was no longer just a waitress in Atlanta, no longer just the girl who sang in secret. She was an artist, a voice recognized across the nation, a symbol of perseverance. But fame hadn't changed her heart. She used her winnings to move her family from their small, crumbling house in Jamaica into a brighter, safer home. For the first time in years, her mother didn't have to worry about medicine or bills. Malik and her little sister could dream beyond survival. And when they called her now, their voices were filled with laughter, not need. One evening, as the sun dipped low over Atlanta, Trinika stood on the porch of her apartment, phone in hand. She scrolled through countless messages from strangers, people who said her voice had healed them, inspired them, reminded them not to give up. She pressed the phone to her chest and whispered, "Thank you, not just to the world, but to God, to her mother, to the struggles that shaped her." Months later, she stood once again at the Magnolia House. Not as a waitress, but as a guest of honor. The restaurant was packed wall to wall, customers cheering, staff beaming with pride. A banner hung across the ceiling, "From our stage to the world. Congratulations, Trinika John." Raymond, fighting tears, handed her the old microphone, the same one she had first touched when she was dared to sing as a joke. She looked at it, smiling softly. "This is where it all began," she said, "and I'll never forget it." When she lifted it to her lips and sang, the room erupted in joy. People swayed, clapped, and some even wept. And for Trinika, this performance wasn't about proving herself anymore. It was about honoring the journey. Every note a thank you to the community that had lifted her when she was too weak to stand. As her voice carried through the restaurant, one thought settled deep in her heart. She had once believed her voice was a secret to be hidden. But now she knew gifts were never meant to be buried. They were meant to be shared, to heal, to unite. And as the final note rang out, the audience rose to their feet, the sound of their applause wrapping her in love. Trinika closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks, and whispered, "I am home." And so, from a humble waitress with a hidden voice to a star who touched millions, Trinika John reminds us that no dream is too small, and no voice is too quiet to be heard. She carried her family's struggles, her community's hopes, and her own fears, and turned them into a song that will echo for years to come.
Thank you so much for staying with us until the very end of this powerful story. Trinika's journey reminds us that no matter where you start, no matter who doubts you, your voice, your gift, can change everything if you refuse to give up. If this story touched your heart, please support the channel by subscribing, sharing this video, or recommending it to your friends and loved ones. It helps us bring you even more stories that inspire and move the soul. We'll be posting another incredible video tomorrow, so make sure you don't miss it. And before you go, check out the video now showing on your screen. It's one you'll definitely want to see next.